appreciate the opportunity to be here today and seeing my colleagues, Representative Martin, Representative Sears, and I served with them for several years, and Bartlesville has a great way of electing people, but I just don't know why you elected Mike Will. How did he get in the mix?
That was a long time.
That was a long time ago.
That's how he messed up. Because he's not here, so I can say that. After he willed, everything went better. Well, when I first got elected, I'm from Claremore, and I got elected in 1998. Mike was my mentor, which again was a scary thing. So all my problems that I had when you guys were there, I'm going to put it on Mike Will for being my mentor, sitting on the back row of the Oklahoma legislature.
Was he keeping you in the minority?
Yeah, he did. When he left, that's when we took the majority. Yeah, get Mike out of there. But you know, Mike invited me to the Bartlesville Chamber golf tournament, and of all the golf tournaments across the state, that's the one I still go to. After how many years is that?
Oh.
98 minus 25, I don't know.
27.
A lot. What year are we in? That's 30 years almost worth of golf tournaments, and I've just about made every one of them. So I hated we were just talking, you changed the name of the Adams course, and I don't know if I can find it now, but anyway, I've always played in that chamber tournament. You guys did a great job bringing legislators in, and it was always a fun event. So I'm going to talk about Will Rogers, a little bit about his aviation background, but you know, it's been 90 years tomorrow since Will Rogers died. It's hard to believe. We're going to celebrate that. August 15th, 1935 was when Will passed away in a plane crash with Wiley. And we have a wreath-laying ceremony tomorrow at noon at the memorial. And we've been doing that since the crash and when the museum was built. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But you know, it's been a long time, so I like to do just a little reminder of who Will Rogers was and what he meant to the country. And this is Eddie Cantor's comment on Will Rogers was America. Put this up here to let you know how big he was. This is he was a top radio host or radio personality. He was a top political pundit. He was a top movie star. He was a top newspaper columnist. He was a top public speaker. He was #1 in all those wrapped into one person. There's probably other things like humanitarian. He traveled all over the country and the world helping with humanitarian causes, but Will was #1 in everything. He was born in Indian Territory, which is a little bit ironic. He was born in Indian Territory and he died in Alaska Territory. So he actually, you know, he didn't live, he wasn't born or die in America. It was in Indian Territory at that time and also in Alaska Territory when he died. This is the Birthplace Ranch in Oologah. He's born there on November 4th in 1879. And where's my, I gotta get my little bag because I've got some presents for you guys. If you answer the right questions, and you two cannot answer, but, and even if you did, I wouldn't give you a book. But you know, when I was in the legislature, I said, you know, I'd love to have Will Rogers quotes. So when I got this job, I created a pocket Will Rogers quotes for our time in the legislature that we give out to politicians every now and then. So I'm going to, I will ask a question every now and then, and if you get it right, you can have a little Will Rogers quote book. So his Indian Territory, November 4th, 1879, which was election day, and he liked to joke that because women couldn't vote back then, his mom had nothing better to do but to have Will Rogers. So that was kind of his political joke to get him started. Oologah Lake was built in the 60s. They had to cut the house in half and move it up the hill. And we actually this was run as a state park for a long time until 1979. Then it was given to the Will Rogers Memorial, and then we just sold to the Cherokee Nation. I ate one of your good cookies. We just sold to the Cherokee Nation a couple of years ago. So it's in the hands of the Cherokees. They're literally gutting the house as we speak to fix it up. It's kind of run down over time, and so they're fixing it all up, and it'll be great. They'll be able to tell the early settler story and the story of the Rogers Ranch there in Oologah. Will never wanted to be a celebrity. That was not his goal. His goal was to be a cowboy. That's all he wanted to do. When the fences came in and the ranch started getting smaller, he got frustrated and he said, you know, I don't want to run this ranch here if it's going to have all these rules and regulations. I'm heading to Argentina with a friend so I can be a gaucho and a cowboy on the wild range of Argentina. So he hopped on a boat and he threw up all the way because he was seasick, but made his way to Argentina to be a gaucho. Found out it was a miserable experience, so he got on another boat and went to South Africa. He's dead broke. He has nothing but just his shoes and a few clothes, and that was it. He's wondering, what am I going to do with my life? Well, he had learned to be a trick roper. He had a passion for roping. His dad had showed him a trick roper when he went to St. Louis, the World's Fair. He had a former slave that taught him how to rope, and he had a passion for roping. And so when he's in South Africa, dead broke, wondering what he's going to do, he saw a sign for Texas Jack's Wild West show, and they needed somebody that could do the big crinoline, which is a big rope trick. And Will could do it. So he got into show business at Texas Jack's Wild West show, and he learned to rope, or he learned to be a celebrity. So he started going to rodeos and different things, and just being a trick roper. He could do all the tricks. He was excellent, probably one of the world's best trick ropers. And then he met this lady in the Oologah train station named Betty Blake. He fell in love immediately, so it was a love at first sight. And in the train station, he went there to pick up a banjo and some long underwear. But when he saw Betty, he forgot that and just took off. He was just amazed with her beauty, and he forgot the long underwear and the banjo there in the train station. But he eventually ran into her a few times in Oologah. She's from Arkansas. They started talking. He really wanted to date her. She really didn't want to date him because he didn't make a living in anything. But eventually he made his way up, and as a celebrity, he started continuing to court her. It took him about 8 years. He said that was the greatest rope trick he ever did to get Betty to marry him. So eventually they married and became a great couple throughout time. But he's now made his way to New York. So they're in New York City, Madison Square Garden. He's doing his rope tricks. A bull gets out and runs into the crowd. He ropes it and brings it down. Well, it's headlines of all over New York. So now this cowboy Indian from Indian Territory is kind of a celebrity. So they put him on stage. He does rope tricks in vaudeville and in the Follies. And this is with all the Follies girls. He liked to joke that he just did tricks while the women changed from nothing to nothing, because that's what they did back then. But you know, Betty said, you know, everybody's got trick roping. They were all doing this, you know, other trick ropers are coming in. He said, you've got to change your stick up a little bit. Will was an avid reader, so he started talking a little bit about politics. He started doing a little bit of jokes here and there, telling some stories. Politicians would be in the crowd. He would rope them and bring them up on stage, and people started finding this humorous. And he kind of got this little shtick about being a stand-up comedian, kind of like you see a Johnny Carson or somebody at a late night would tell these stories, and every show then became different. It wasn't just trick roping. So people loved to do that. They loved to hear what Will Rogers had to say. And he had this just aw shucks joking about him, so it was never personal, it was never mean, it was always kind-hearted, and people loved to hear him. So his fame started to grow a little bit. So he would go to baseball games. He was a huge baseball fan, and just do trick ropes and stuff. And here he is. Anybody know who this is? Raise your hand if you know who the baseball player is.
Dizzy Dean.
Dizzy Dean, that's right. The 1934 World Series. He's here with Dizzy Dean. He's there on behalf of Henry Ford because the Detroit Lions were in the World Series that year, and Will was in the box with Henry Ford at this World Series. All right, anybody know who this gentleman is? They're playing golf, and Will lost a dime bet.
Yeah.
Anybody want to guess?
John D.
Rockefeller.
John D. Rockefeller. You said it, but you
said
can't
it
win.
first. No, he said it.
he's out.
Actually, he
You
said,
say
No.
Yeah, but then
you get a book, whether you like. You can give it to a friend, but you won, and
Well,
Representative
we're
Martin
shy.
almost won.
Yeah.
I'll give you one someday.
okay.
But that's John D. Rockefeller. Will became friends with a lot of celebrities. I won't do this because it's too easy. Shirley Temple. And then, you know, as Will celebrity rose, he traveled around the world. When he came back from one of his trips, Beverly Hills, they were trying to make it on the national stage. So let's make Will the honorary mayor. So Will literally got off the boat, and all of a sudden he's shipped through town, and they have signs everywhere. And he was the honorary mayor of Beverly Hills, and that kind of helped get Beverly Hills on the map a little bit when they made him honorary mayor. Will was an incredibly hard worker. So in 1922, he started writing a weekly column. He went from New York over to England. And they said, the New York Times back then, they said, hey, why don't you write a weekly article? And so he did, about his trips over there. And then it turned into a daily column in 1927. So every day from 1927 till the day he died, he wrote a daily column. And he would be at the movie studios, he would get in his car, he would type out his daily column, he would hand it to the Western Union kid who would run off and try to get it out before 5 o'clock. So it's an incredible time to him doing everything he was doing and still writing a daily column. And it was a few sentences, but he worked hard on doing that. And of course he always was working on his trick roping and working on a script here in the movie, and a lot of times he ad-libbed those. And they said whenever Will Rogers ad-libbed a line, it was always better than what was written in the script. And but he became a big movie star. In 1934, he was the #1 movie star in America. And in 1935, he was #2, only got beat by one person. Anybody want to make a wild guess? Little girl. Shirley Temple Beach. But he was still #1 male in 1935. And he became a kind of a pundit that would, and also people wanted to hear what he had to say on more serious issues. So when the Great Depression happened, the president wanted to give a speech, and he wanted to get an audience. So Herbert Hoover needed an audience to hear him speak, so he contacted Will Rogers and said, "Will you come speak before me to get a crowd?" Can you imagine the president doing that today? Said, "Hey, can you come give a speech so I can get a crowd?" And anyway, that's what they did. So Will spoke first, and then the president spoke afterwards. This is one of his famous lines that he gave, and and more people wanted to hear Will's speech and get copies and transcripts of that than they did the president because of this talk. And we play that in the museum. It's called Bacon, Beans, and Limousines. Is the kind of is the talk that he gave, and just talked about how difficult it was for everybody. Very serious tone that he took in that talk. One of his lines: "The income tax made more liars out of the American people than golf has." Which we golfed many times, and people forget that we didn't have an income tax until it was 1918 or so. So anyway, he joked about that. This is one that keeps us all humble. Everybody's ignorant only on different subjects. So keep us all humble. If we get too arrogant on one thing, we know that we're ignorant on something else. Well, the first time he made a joke in front of the president was Woodrow Wilson. He's in Baltimore. Woodrow Wilson heard about Will Rogers, came to hear him talk. Will was so nervous, he didn't want to go up on stage. They literally shoved him out on stage. He gets up on stage and he tells a joke about trying to get Poncha Villa, but there was too much red tape. And everybody looked at Woodrow Wilson to see if he was going to laugh, and the president laughed. So when he did, that gave Will the confidence to make jokes about presidents. And he never really endorsed anybody. He just kind of played the field. But in 1932, he did come out and give a speech for President Roosevelt, a candidate. This is Roosevelt's son. And Roosevelt did what a good politician should do. When they're making fun of him, you laugh. And he did, and they were funny jokes. But it's an introduction to President Roosevelt in 1932. Anybody know who this lady is?
Yes.
Wizard of Oz?
Linda?
Linda,
The
who said
Wicked
Linda?
Witch?
The Good Witch.
The Good
Good
Witch.
Witch.
Sorry.
Yes.
In the very back, we have a book. Pass that. She's coming.
Yeah.
Yep, that's
Right
the
here.
Good Witch.
Thank you.
And actually, she ended up marrying Florence Ziegfeld of Ziegfeld Follies. And in the museum, we have a saddle that Will Rogers gave to their daughter, and then they eventually gave it back to the museum. So we have her daughter's saddle given by Will Rogers in the museum, so that's kind of neat. And of course, Will Rogers traveled, this is a movie scene, but Will Rogers traveled all over the world and became an ambassador. And when he would travel, like he went to Russia and wrote a book, There's No Bathing Suits in Russia, but when he came back, or to China, when he came back, the president would invite him in. He wanted to know, because Will was on the front lines talking to the people and the politicians, and he'd come in and brief the president on what he saw. So we're going to talk a little bit about aviation, so I definitely want to do that. Will Rogers loved to fly. When he first got on a plane, he just got a passion for it. Now, he never flew himself. He was never a pilot, but he loved to ride in planes. It was one of his favorite things to do. This is with Roscoe Turner, who was a trick. He did circus flying and all that, so Will knew him. I love this, seeing the outfit that Will had to put on for some of the flights. And remember, this is a very, very dangerous time. I mean, you were looking at 25 to 30 to 40% of planes were crashing and people were dying during this time. I mean, this is the experimental phase, but Will knew this was the future. And so he was the biggest civic supporter of aviation, promoting it all the time. I love this picture too. He's getting ready to go, eating a donut, but he always had his newspaper. Wherever he went to a town, if he came to Bartlesville, he would grab the newspaper and read about what's going on, know who the mayor is, so when it was time to get up and talk, he could talk about what's going on locally. So he was an avid reader. So we always tell the kids, learn to read. Will was a terrible student in school. He got demerits all the time for getting in trouble, but he was an avid reader, and so if you can read, you can make it in life, right? These are just some other generic pictures of Will Rogers in different planes. Another one where he's just getting ready and got his little flight suit on. This one here, he's with Amon Carter, who is a famous newspaper man in Fort Worth, Texas. He really loved Will Rogers. And every time Will was in Texas, he had a room for him. He would be in parades. And if you go to Fort Worth, there's the Will Rogers Coliseum. And there's statues to Will Rogers there. It is because Amon Carter loved Will Rogers so much. Here he is in a plane from Ford. And here he is with Charles Lindbergh. Again, he never flew. And you might, I don't know if you've ever heard this story or not, but when Charles Lindbergh's baby was taken, horrible tragedy, Lindbergh actually housed up at Will Rogers' home to get away from everybody for a week or so, and Will kept the Lindbergh family there during that tragic time. One other thing amazing about Will is that he was one of the few people that the government allowed him to pay his postage to fly in mail planes. So he would weigh himself, he'd pay his postage, he'd put stickers on him, and he could fly in mail planes. And so he did, and probably so the government could get good positive news from Will, but he did, and he flew all over the country in mail planes, and of course he learned to sleep on planes and do whatever was necessary, but a very unique opportunity to have that from Will. And of course Betty, you know, she was always nervous when Will flew. I mean, he would tell her it's going to be okay, and Will was in a couple crashes. One of them he broke several ribs. Didn't tell Betty about it because he didn't want her to worry and didn't want her to tell him he couldn't fly because he was going to fly. And he said, if your time is worth anything, fly instead of drive. So he wanted to do it, but she was very, very nervous about it. So when they was getting ready to go to Alaska, he was going to take the family and take some friends. Some of those all fell through. But Wiley Post needed to go to Alaska. Wiley was wanting to get a mail route from Alaska over to Russia because, you know, he flew around the world. And so he wanted to go, and he needed somebody that could provide the money. Well, Will had the money, and Will would love to travel. And he had, you know, Wiley was a fellow Oklahoman, and he had total trust in Wiley Post. And so Will agreed to do that. So they flew out of Seattle to start off and go on the trip, and he told all his family, "Don't worry, no problems. We're going to be all right." And so they took off and they flew to Alaska. They saw the sights. This plane was basically hand built by Wiley Post, and the engine, the nose was very heavy in this. They had pontoons on the bottom of it. But Wiley was able to fly it. The inspectors would not have approved that plane today, but it was Wiley Post. I mean, I know you guys know a little bit about Wiley, but Wiley flew around the world. He held the speed record around the world for 17 years until Howard Hughes beat him with some fancy technology plane. And what's amazing is Wiley flew around the world by himself, which is incredible, with, you know, compass essentially. And everybody knows of Charles Lindbergh. Well, Charles Lindbergh only got one ticker tape parade in New York. Wiley Post got 2 ticker tape parades in New York, but hardly anybody knows about Wiley, and probably part of it is because, you know, when he crashed, one of the most popular people in the world was in his plane. And they did crash on August 15th, 1935. So Will's the #1 star in the world. Everybody's reading, hearing Will Rogers on the radio, watching his movies. He'd been traveling around and doing humanitarian things, so he really was the most popular person in the world. And they were up in Alaska all by themselves. They were lost in the fog, flying around, trying to get to Point Barrow. Wiley landed in this lagoon, saw some Inuit Indians there, asked them for directions. They were only 12 miles away. The plane took off, sputtered, and crashed and killed both men instantly. One of the tribesmen ran to Point Barrow. Took them a little while to get there. When they got there, they told the world, and then we had all the headlines. This is fascinating. How many are aviation people in here that love planes or know about planes? This is the Winnie Mae. There's a one just like it in Oklahoma City, and I think the original is in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. This is the plane Will and Wiley flew on. What is the biggest difference in these two planes? Anybody see?
Oh, seaplane.
Huh?
It's a seaplane.
Yeah?
That's not.
High wing, low
wings.
wing.
Right.
So people, everybody wondered, why did they crash? And we had people come in, one said that they found this a fuselage of a similar airplane in St. Louis in a river. And they said there was a switch in that one that the pilot hit and it killed the engine. But then a gentleman came in a few years ago, and this made the most sense I've ever heard about why they crashed. Because Wiley, he had already flown this plane for 7 days, no problem, all over Alaska. But the difference in these two wing locations is this is a gravity feed because all the fuel are in the wings. And this is a gravity feed. So when you think about your own car, if you have gasoline up here and you turn to the right, the gas is going to roll down and it's going to just gravity feed into your engine. Well, this is a pump feed. So now you've got the wings at the bottom and you have a pump. So think about again your car, if you're sitting on a hill and your gas is down here, if your pump's up here, your car's dead. So the theory that I thought was very good is while they were flying and lost, they ran out of gas in one of the wings. And so when Wiley landed, he didn't flip the switch. You flip the switch and it goes to the other wing, and that's how you have the gas in the other wing. And so the theory was when he took off and they turned, the gas was not getting to the fuel pump, and that made it stop. And because it was so nose heavy, there was nothing you can do. At that point, it's gone down. So that made a lot of sense to me and about why they may have crashed. But ultimately, we'll never know why they crashed. We have a few parts of the plane. They're in the museum now. But Wiley's widow, she wanted the plane scuttled. So they took the plane, and it was sent to the North Pacific and is in the bottom of the ocean. Matter of fact, I had Jim Bridenstine, who headed NASA, when he was a congressman. He contacted me and asked about trying to find this plane. And when he found out it was in the North Pacific, that's going to be hard to find because the Titanic made a lot of news when it was found. But doubt we'll be able to find that plane somewhere in the Pacific. But she wanted it out and wanted nobody to be able to see it as a monument or anything else. So it's in the North Pacific somewhere. But anyway, I thought that was a very interesting theory. So after the crash, of course, there are headlines all over the world. Vancouver Sun here, this is San Francisco Chronicle. Everybody's mourning Will Rogers, and what are we going to do? Will said, what constitutes a life well spent anyway? Love and admiration from your fellow man is all that anyone can ask. The crowds that came, Will is buried over here. The crowds were huge. This is just one day, and I mean, hour after hour after hour, thousands upon thousands of people came and walked by the tomb. Congress closed session. Now remember, this is for a humorist. Congress closed session, movie screens went dark, radios stopped. Congress actually passed a $2 million appropriation, and it was unanimous in the House and Senate. It got to President Roosevelt's desk, who was a friend of Will's, and he vetoed it because there wasn't a plan. Imagine that. Legislators passed something without a plan. We'd never do that, but they did. They passed it and said, we got to honor Will. But it was a Great Depression, and the president said, unless there's a plan, and he vetoed it. But the Oklahoma legislature stepped up to put some money into it. This is a shrine. Anybody know where this is? Anybody? Shrine of the Sun? Nobody? Colorado Springs. So next time you go to Colorado Springs. You got to drive through the zoo, drive up a hill. But there was a hotelier there named Spencer Penrose, who has the Broadmoor that's at the bottom of the hill. Very, very wealthy man. Was building this for where he and his wife are going to be buried. But he had such respect for Will. He recognized the obligation of good citizenship and lived accordingly, and he renamed the monument the Will Rogers Memorial Shrine of the Sun. So next time you're in Colorado Springs, drive up this little bitty road and go up and you can see the monument. Statues to Will. We got this one at the Will Rogers Memorial. Where is another one? Anybody want to make a while? Anybody know where this is at? There's a university in Texas that has one of these. No Texas Tech fans in here? Watch a Texas Tech football game and you'll see this statue, but it will be wrapped in red, white, and black. They wrap it all different colors, but almost every game you see Texas Tech, they're going to fly by because they have a group of people, kind of like, you know, Pistol Pete's and things. They have a group that all they do is wrap this. And my staff went down a couple years ago, participated. It's quite the process, they said. I mean, they spend like 2 or 3 hours wrapping it with crepe paper and all this stuff all over the place, and it'll be dolled up. They say that they set this up where the rear end of the horse is facing Texas A&M. So that's what they say. Anyway, so watch football this year. It's coming up in a few weeks, and see if you see the statue. There's 2 of those too also in Fort Worth with Amon Carter. So we have the flower, the Will Rogers Senior, named after Will. There's a park in Beverly Hills, Will Rogers Park. There's places all over the place. Of course, we have schools. And then 3 years later, after lots and lots of committees and meetings, the Will Rogers Memorial was built. And they were trying to figure out where to put it. And Will and Betty bought this property in 1911. So they were going to build a retirement home here. It's overlooking Claremore. And so she made the final decision, because every state wanted it. And she made the final decision it was going to be in Claremore. And this is the opening day, November 4th. The President of the United States spoke at this. He wasn't there physically, but he spoke. And then there were politicians and friends of Will Rogers from Hollywood that were all there for the grand opening on November 4th, 1938. And we're a state agency, so it was funded by the state of Oklahoma. It's still funded by the state of Oklahoma. We are now under the Oklahoma Historical Society. I thought I'd be more efficient if we would merge with the Oklahoma Historical Society, and we did that a few years ago, and so that's who manages right now. In 1952, we had the Will Rogers Highway, which coming up on the 100th anniversary of Route 66, so we're doing that. And imagine this, 31 years after Will died, a nuclear submarine was named after him. I mean, how many submarines get named after a humorist? And we still have they have a reunion every year, and every 5 or 6 years they come to Memorial for the reunion. Then there was Will Rogers Follies in 1991. Matter of fact, we have a huge collection of Will Rogers memorabilia because a guy watched the Follies, fell in love with Will, named his son Will, of course, started collecting Will Rogers stuff and donated to the museum a few years ago. Of course, there's a state park in California. This is where Will Rogers' house was, and his ranch, and Betty gave this. I mean, Will had a lot of property, and so taxes after he died were very, very high. So Betty gave this to the state of Oklahoma or California, said, please take care of this, and it's yours, and it's about 160 acres or so, and it had a horse trail up at the top of the hill. I mean, Will knew property. He was in Beverly Hills, and people, the celebrities at Beverly Hills couldn't really care much for the smell of Will's horses, so they encouraged him to leave. So he bought this ranch, which back then was way outside of town in Santa Monica. But it's beautiful property. He owned part of the beach, which is now Will Rogers Beach, and the other side you could get up on the hill and look at the ocean and look at Los Angeles. So wonderful piece of property.
Was that in the burn area, by the way?
Burned to the ground. Will had a beautiful barn built that was nice on the house. So if you remember back in January of this year, wildfires were sweeping through. They had worked on plan to get stuff out of there in case there was a fire, because there's always threats of fires, and they didn't follow any of the regulations to get the stuff out. So it was just, it was a fire drill. They just pulled trucks up and threw what they could as the fire got closer, and that's what's left of the house. So it's just heartbreaking to see the fire take everything. Jennifer Rogers, the great-granddaughter, she had actually moved to Claremore about 2 weeks before this happened. She had put together a foundation, run the Foundation California for like 20 years to support the house. And she had just moved to Claremore because we're doing a big renovation there, or here. And 2 weeks later, this all burned down. So she's actually in California now, because there's another wildfire near Bakersfield where she's from, and her son-in-law ranch got burned down. She was actually watching the news, national news, and they were talking about it, and all of a sudden there's her son-in-law being interviewed about losing part of his ranch. So wildfires all over California, but just tragic. You can't replace this. I mean, it was a very, very unique house. Lots of tourists came in. They had a polo field that was there, but it's been burned to the ground. So now what about the legacy of Will? I mean, where do we go from here? Of course, we have the museum. This is the museum out as it looks today. The original was about right here. This part is the original building. all this right here that was built in 1938, and the 100th anniversary of Will's birth, which was 1979. They built this wing over here. They got the money in '79, finished this in '82. So our offices are here. There's a theater and different things over here. But by miracle of miracles, representatives, we got some money from the legislature just a couple of years ago, and now we're going to upgrade some things. $7 million. $7 million. I think when I was in for 12 years, I might give them $100,000 for something, but $7 million. We're going to be building a new 3-story event center, new entryway, new parking for Will's Legacy. We're going to have the first floor is going to be collections because our vaults are terrible. There was a match that went off. They all burned down. So we'll have a new collections area, offices, and then on the 3rd floor we'll have an event center overlooking Claremore to help raise revenue that the legislature will appreciate that we're raising some revenue there as well. So very, very exciting time for us, raising money to get all this done. And the other thing is, is character traits. America, we feel like Oklahomans and Americans need a good role model citizen. And so we've designed this whole program on character traits of Will Rogers, his integrity, his work ethic. I mean, he got invited to go do go do movies in Los Angeles, and he had shaken the hand of Mr. Ziegfeld that he's going to finish this, doing his Ziegfeld Follies. And even though he had no contract, he was a man of his word. So he's a man of integrity. Humility. Will had humility. He loved to laugh. His empathy towards others. His services. Him and Babe Ruth at a children's hospital. He loved to explore. Took time to spend time with his family and relax. Avid reader and learning, and had enthusiasm for life. So we have these 10 character traits that we're going to be going through the museum. We're redesigning all the exhibits to update those as well. So we'll have these character traits in a little kiosk, plus you'll learn about Will. This is going to be a really neat exhibit here. We call it Crescendo. You'll be in 1934, 1935. Will's the biggest star in the world. Everybody is hearing or seeing Will Rogers. You're going to walk up this little ramp, and then you're going to walk through these doors, and when you do, you're going to be, the temperature's going to drop 20 degrees. You're going to be in this room. It's going to be quiet, and then you're going to, you won't see it, but you'll hear the crash and the moment when that happened. To be big celebrity, and then in the middle of the wild of Alaska is where he died in almost complete solitude. And then the next room you walk into is the morning after. The President of the United States dedicating the memorial for the memory of Will Rogers. So we're working on this right now to have those exhibits, and we're going to have new exhibits throughout the museum, and we're going to have this really cool vaudeville show that we're going to have, and then hopefully you'll be able to hear this. Let's see if this works.
When is that going to open?
Hopefully in 2 years.
2 years.
Now, it is so good to see you, and I truly mean it, because it's been more than 85 years since I've been able to say that. And now, first, I want to say thank you for considering supporting the Memorial Museum, dedicated in my honor. As you might know, I was born in the Cherokee Nation Indian Territory, near the town of Oologah. To say that I love Oklahoma is a bit of an understatement. I love my family, my friends, the values I learned in the territory. My father, Lynn, was there at the Constitutional Convention when Oklahoma became a state. They even named the county after him, even though most folks think they named it for me. I called Claremore my hometown because I used to joke that no one could pronounce Oologah. I always tried to live my life to the fullest. Always trying to do things like radio, starring in the motion pictures, performing on the vaudeville stage, giving speeches, writing for newspapers, flying in airplanes, and most importantly, helping those in need. That's the thing I enjoy the most. And having the chance to speak with folks all over this great big old world. And that's why I'm here now. There is nothing I would love more than have the opportunity to share my stories with folks again at the museum and across the globe. But when I hear tell, well, I need your help. This fancy technology today costs my bit more than those little silent pictures I used to do. But I hope if you help bring me back, we can encourage folks to see the good in one another and find out how much we all have in common, and might even have laughter. tried to see the good in people. And it's true, I never met a man I didn't like. I feel like that is an Oklahoma message, which is kindness. And what I'm hoping to do is share that now to you with all the people I interact with. That's what I'm seeing across the globe. I would always love Oklahoma, and all this wonderful state has done to honor me, bringing me back to visit our citizens again. It'll be a treat beyond measure. Maybe I can even get to meet some of those good folks working at the state capitol. And wouldn't that be an honor? I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll be seeing you.
That's pretty cool technology. We've been working on that for over a year. We're going through a whole Q&A. Now this is, I'll talk about that in a second. Got some from Bartlesville. This is what Will said on September 22nd, 1929. When you're visiting the beauty spots of this country, don't overlook Frank Phillips Ranch and Game Preserve at Bartlesville, Oklahoma. It is the most unique place in this country. Got everything but reindeer. He shipped 50 down from Alaska at $1,000 a piece. They stood the summer fun, and they all froze to death in the winter. So Will, I know there's a room named after Will up there and some other thing. I think he signed the book that's there at Willow Rock, but there he is talking about it. But that technology is incredible. And we're going to have it set up where you'll be able to have a Q&A session with Will. We're working on it now. We're asking him questions, getting the responses back. Are they accurate? And also, is it the right tone? You know what I'm saying? Mean things about, especially politicians, right? So it is an incredible process. But we've put like 30 books into his head. You can ask him all kinds of questions, and he can respond. And it really is like where you saw that. That technology. We have an actor that played Will and portrayed him, and then we had the head that was built and the voice and all that. So technology is moving fast, but we will have that in a couple of years where you'll be able to have a conversation with Will. Hopefully we'll have it in school and as well, so kids can have access to that. Anyway, it said, live your life so whenever you lose, you're ahead. And there just literally was no one like Will Rogers. I like to say, I believe he was the most beloved person in American history. Everybody here's George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. I mean, half the country hated Abraham Lincoln, but everybody from all walks of life loved Will Rogers. And so it's our job to keep that legacy alive. So I'm on time. Before I let you ask me questions, I want to show you one more thing. This is kind of neat. We did this for our kids camp, and this again, what the technology they can do. So you saw Will Rogers there. This next one I want to show you is a little video we played at kids camp. So we have one of our employees has written several children's books on Will, and this person has taken the pictures from that book and has animated them. We have this new stuffed animal of one of Will's pets. So we're going to have this augmented reality. So kids will have their phone and they can hold it up, and they'll pick the pet they want. There's Jock the dog. We have Sarah the cow, because we'll have a pet cow, and then we're going to have Teddy the horse, which is the horse he had on stage. Does anybody know where Will Rogers, where he got the nickname of Teddy for his horse?
Teddy Roosevelt.
I heard it over here first. Who said Teddy Roosevelt? Oh, wasn't Earl good? Yeah, that's a good guess. Good guess. Teddy Roosevelt. So he loved Teddy Roosevelt. So that was his horse Teddy. So kids will pick the animal they want. The animal will give them tours throughout the museum. So we're selling Jock, which is the dog, and eventually we'll have all three of them. And so hopefully they'll get a tour from Jock, and then buy the stuffed animal, the T-shirt, and the lunch pail, and all that kind of stuff too. So a little marketing in that as well, but it'd be great for kids to have that. So I want to show you the other thing that's really cool in this technology you're going to see. They took a still picture, a couple of still pictures of Will Rogers' family, and animated those. So this hopefully this will work. I know you can't hear it as well because it's not plugged in the TV with the sound, but anyway, you'll get to see the technology work.
Hey kids, I'm Jock, Will Rogers' pet terrier. I'm super duper excited that you came to this year's camp. This is my very first camp, and I can't wait to have fun with all of you. I hope you're learning lots about my best friend, Will Rogers. He was an amazing person who loved having adventures and trying new things, just like me. I want you all to enjoy every moment of camp, and don't forget to look for my brand new Jock plushie dolls hidden around the museum. I would love to have so many fun adventures with you.
still shots of Will and the dog, and then somehow they animated them. And anyway, crazy technology today. So, well, that concludes that. You guys have any questions? Oh.
Yeah, hey, take us through is his wife buried over there? Take us
Yes.
through that.
So Will was actually
who's
buried
now
in
involved?
California. Yeah, huh?
And you know, help us still,
Will
what
was
family's
buried in
involved?
California, and that's where they expected him to stay. But the crowd that came to the museum were just huge. I mean, they had to get the National Guard out to police the crowds that were coming in. They had to let so many people in. So they decided they needed to move Will to the memorial. So several major donors, and Phillips was one. We have the Phillips brothers actually donated money to help bring Will Rogers back to Oklahoma. So we have a plaque with them. There's another gentleman named Ewing Hazel. So if you're familiar at all with Veneta, there's a school there named after Ewing Hazel, has a big ranch. And then, so anyway, so in 1942, they got the plans, they built the sunken garden, they snuck Will in it finished in 1944. They literally snuck Will in late at night, didn't tell anybody, so they could have him there so there weren't huge crowds. And then Betty died that same year of cancer in 1944. She's buried there. And then he had 4 children, Will Jr., and then 3 other children. One of them died when he was 2 years old, but the other 3 children are buried there as well. This is an interesting story too. Mary, which was his daughter, just absolutely adored Will. She was actually in a play in New York with Humphrey Bogart. And in that play, her father died in a plane crash. And the story is that Humphrey Bogart's the one that came up right after that play and told her that, you know, Will had died in a plane crash. So, tragedy. She actually kind of disappeared after that. I mean, she married once, but she went to Europe, and you hardly ever hear her marry. You've heard of Will Jr. He went to Congress, got elected, when served in the military, and then they had another son named James. He's buried there. His wife's buried there as well. So we do have several family members that are buried there. And it's really nice, and we open the tomb up once a year during spring break to let visitors go in and see the tomb. And what's interesting down there is on Betty's tomb, it says she's buried in 1880, or was born in 1880. When she was born in 1879, the only theory we can come up with is they didn't want it to look like she was older than Will. Anyway, it's interesting. There's Martin.
Yeah, you forgot one story.
I know you're going to tell a story. I didn't say it. Damn it. All right, you can tell.
First, a little background information. In 1934, all universities had polo teams. Oklahoma A&M, Oklahoma, the universities around the state had polo teams, and polo, of course, was Will's passion. And there was a polo team at Oklahoma Military Academy at Claremore. And Will had a polo club in California with people like Walt Disney and a bunch of movie stars. I can't remember their names right now, but you would know most of their team. And they were feeling pretty good about how good they were, and they said they were talking about how good they were. And so Will goes to Claremore because it's his hometown, and there's a polo game at Oklahoma Military Academy that afternoon, and he was familiar with the team. But he went up and he saw that game, and he went back to California and said, guys, you think you're good, but there's a high school team from my hometown that can beat us. And so he went back, made arrangements with the university, with Oklahoma Military Academy. Oklahoma Military Academy would have been too small to have a polo team, but they were a cavalry school, so they had horses. Anyway, so he paid for the cadets and took all their horses, all of them, to California. The #1 team in the country at the time was Arizona State. They played them and beat them on the way out. The #2 team in the country was Stanford University. They played Stanford 3 games, well, it would have been 3, but they beat them in the first 2, so they didn't have to play the third. They won the national championship, and they were planning on following it up the next year, but Will had to go to Alaska.
Yeah, that's right. He loved polo, and he brought him out there.
Yeah.
Spencer Tracy and others. Matter of fact, I was listening to a story on Walt Disney, and and they said that he fell and in a polo match and hurt himself, and they say that later on when he died it was because of that injury. And Will and Walt Disney played polo together, so I wouldn't be a bit surprised if it, when he fell, that it was when he was poloing with Will Rogers. He never, of course, poloed again, Walt Disney, but Will loved polo as way he could ride horses. So, yeah. I'm glad you had that story. If I was going to come back later and do it on horse and not aviation, I could have told them. Now you told them, I can't come back. No, exactly right. It's a great story.
My father knew Will Rogers.
Oh, really?
And yeah, we're an old family and go all the way back to the Revolutionary War. I've got somebody that fought in the Revolutionary War. And when my dad took me over to Uligal, to where Clem Rogers had the original ranch, it's now underwater.
Yeah.
Before they moved it. And anyway, Will had 3 sisters, I believe. One was Helen, McSpadden, married Tom McSpadden in Chelsea. And then he had another sister married Gunner Lane.
Yeah, that's where Clem McSpadden came from.
Pardon?
So you remember Clem McSpadden, lobbyist? Yeah.
Yeah. Clem was the later generation. But the second one was Gunner Lane, who was up here in Dewey. And there was a third sister, I think, that married somebody, I can't remember who it was. You happen to know?
No.
But he was somebody not around this area.
You know, I know the Lanes, Jerry golfing up here at Adams or whatever you call it now, and and then Coke, of course. She was the last living relative that knew Will and told so many stories about Will.
And Helen Eaton McSpadden Eaton was my teacher in music in grade school, and her mother was Cliff's sister, and then she had a daughter named Helen McSpadden Eaton. So that's a little history.
Yeah, well, Clem, we have a picture of Clem when he was like 4 years old, sitting on the fence outside of Will's house, and there was a saddle that was from Will Rogers to Clem, and after Clem passed, it's disappeared. So if anybody ever comes across it, we really would like to have that, but it's out there somewhere. That's a good story, though. It's neat to know. We have a lot of people around Claremore that are related to Will. I mean, everybody comes in, I'm related to Will. Rogers, McSpaddens, and we have a whole family tree of people related to Will. So. Any other comments or questions? Yes, sir?
My dad said during the early part of the Great Depression that Will Rogers would come around to different towns, and of course he knew a lot of people there where I grew up, and even though it was poor times, why Will would give a speech, and he knew who the money people were in that town, and he'd point out somebody and call out their name. He said, "I fine you $5,000." It was all for charity, you see.
Yeah. If you ever get a chance, if you're driving to Memphis or anything and you're going on I-40 and you swing by Russellville, Arkansas, go to Arkansas Tech, and at Arkansas Tech, outside of their basketball gym is a big monument to Will Rogers. And I got a call when I first got the job in 2014. I got a call from them that said, "Hey, we got this monument to Will Rogers here, and we're putting it back together. It kind of fallen into disrepair." And they fixed it all up. And they did that because Will was traveling around during the Great Depression supporting communities. He went there, spoke in their gymnasium, raised them a couple $1,000s, which they put towards an airport, and they built that monument to Will Rogers. It's outside the basketball gym there in Russellville. So that's kind of neat. Lots of those around the country.
I don't know if there's any more questions, but I just got to say this. I want the room to know that he's represented Martin and I numerous times, but he did serve in the state legislature. He was a floor leader, he was in leadership roles, did a phenomenal job representing the state of Oklahoma in his duties and carrying them out for the area and his 42-some thousand constituents. He just really was a great legislator, and it was an honor to work with him and under him as my floor leader, because everything has to go through a floor leader. Now, saying that, but also say, I know you're the director of the museum, but I got to tell you, my friend, you've done a phenomenal job. And being as a director, it's obvious you got to know what you're doing, but you've done a great job conveying with your voice and the passion that you have and the life of this man. You've done a great job. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, good. I didn't know so. I listen to all your bills when I was floor leader. That's great. No, and I have a passion. I mean, I didn't talk much on the legislature. I grew up in Claremore, 2 miles from the museum. I went to school in Oologah and graduated there, which is the hometown of Will. I've been around him. My elementary school was a block from the memorial, so I've been around Will my whole life. People say, were you related to Will? Because I'm kind of laid back and like to have fun and stuff. I have no relation, but my Jones family is from Alabama, and Will's family is from Guntersville, Alabama. And so, you know, my Irish, and Will has Scotch-Irish in him. He's a quarter Cherokee. Dadgummit, that was my last question for a book. So, I don't know, who wants the last book? I can throw it in the air and grab it. You'll say, well, how much
Somebody will take
percentage?
it.
How you get one for raising your hand? I don't even know why you did it, but maybe you have a question. But anyway, it's quarter Cherokee, but it does have Scotch-Irish. I've always wondered if my family, you know, they were just, you know, not too far away from each other if they ever interacted with each other. But anyway, yes, sir.
What part of Alabama? You say he was from Guntersville. What about your family?
Parrish, Alabama, which is near Birmingham, going west a little ways.
Okay, further
Yeah,
south.
Jasper,
Yeah,
Parrish.
further south in Guntersville.
Yeah, you can fit all of Parrish in this room.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, not very big. So, yeah, and Gutters still has, they honor Will and the family periodically, and there's another town in Texas. I could ask this question, but nobody know it. Okay, anybody know there's a town in the Panhandle of Texas that has a Will Rogers Days event? Anybody have any idea who that might be? Oh, this is impossible.
Well,
I
the
didn't even
only
know.
town in the Panhandle is Amarillo.
Yeah. Well, the northern, I'm thinking.
I want to just take a guess. Border?
Will Rogers?
Higgins, Texas. Will went out there one summer in Higgins, Texas, little bitty old town.
Oh, yeah, it is.
And we found out they have a Will Rogers Days. And we went out there 3 or 4 years ago, and they have a parade that takes about 2 minutes. Kid you not. And then they have a big, you know, barbecue for the town. But we went out there a couple of times to Higgins. So, yes, sir.
What happened to the little house that was a replica along Highway 169 there of the railroad?
I think there's still one there. I know one of it got destroyed at one time, and then I think they've rebuilt it, so I think they still have the replica there.
I don't think they do. I did not where it was originally anyway.
Yeah, no, it's more in the downtown area, but I'm
Okay.
almost positive it's there.
And one other quick
Makes me want to
question.
drop by there again and check.
You know, Wally Post was blind in one eye. Can private owners of an aircraft fly today with being blind in one eye?
That's a question I do not know.
The answer is no.
No, it cannot.
Yeah. I don't think we'd want
You
to.
can't trust them.
How about where is Wiley Post buried?
That's a good question.
Edmund?
Edmund, yep. Who said that? Oh, you already got a book.
I know, I don't need another.
That's
one.
cool.
You need to go see it too. His wife did not want anything to say where Wiley was buried. It was, you know, again, very quiet, whatever. But they eventually built, near there, like in the center median, a monument to Wiley.
Where did Wiley Post set the world altitude record?
I don't know.
Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
Oh, I did not know that. Wow.
That's where he
This
took
book's
off, where
mine.
he landed.
I don't know.
Muskogee.
Okay.
He discovered the jet stream.
The jet stream.
Yeah.
Bartlesville, huh?
He
Yeah.
flew up high
That is
enough to
pretty
get in the jet stream. The jet stream blew him off.
As far as I'm concerned, he landed back at Bartlesville.
Well, you got a painting at Willow Rock I really want of Will Rogers, so if any of you sneak in there and grab it for me, I'll
Yeah, we'll get right on that for you.
I got a picture of my kids, they came over this summer, and there's a picture of them acting like they're taking it. Just sneak it out real quick. Nobody will know. Yes, sir? Is there somebody else? Oh, yes.
I used to work with a guy back in the 70s who was a private pilot with one eye. I don't know if it's true now or not.
Yeah.
His was in the Korean War. He got some plexiglass in it. And then while I was there, about late 1970s, the doctors, the medical people pulled out the plexiglass and he had two eye vision again.
Wow. What is amazing with Wiley, I mean, one eye, he had to teach himself depth perception, and his experience as a pilot was only a few years. I mean, only 4 or 5 years from the time he started flying to becoming the big celebrity and all the things he did. And he also, what did Wiley Post invent first?
Pressure.
That's right, pressure suit. Matter of fact, there's a TV show out there called Mythbusters, and one of the Mythbuster guys created that pressure suit and took it to these comic conventions and wore it around, and nobody knew who he was, but yeah, Wiley Post was the first person to create that pressure suit.
Did Wiley, he didn't participate in the flight from, I believe, to Hawaii from the US. It had, like Lindbergh in it or somebody like that?
No, he didn't do that one. That was one crazy group of people that did that.
Yeah.
Golly, that was interesting. Well, I really appreciate you coming up. I love coming up to your kiddie park. That thing is fantastic, and so I wish my kids were little again to go back and do that, but you guys have a great kiddie park. So keep that going. And didn't you just have a 100th year, or what was it, 50th year anniversary, or 75th of the kiddie park? Just
Something like
recently?
that, I think it was 75th.
75th, yeah.
You do know Little Rock's 100th anniversary.
That's right. Hey, I got my invitation to your Cow Thieves event out there, which is great that you're doing. Thank you all so much.